Another Unplugged with Nicki Marie. This one is near and dear to my heart in a way that is different than most. I reached out to today's guest in April of 2022 on Instagram direct message, and I was like, when I get a podcast, you have to be on it. And 2 years later, we are here with Bella, otherwise known as A Kid with Two Homes. Her entire platform and vlog is about the child's perspective to growing up in two homes because of divorce. So welcome, Bella, to the conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicki. I'm so excited to be here.
So it's 6 a.m. in Sydney, Australia right now. And look at her. She looks marvelous.
It is 6 a.m. It is, but I'm up bright and early and so excited to chat to you. This is such an important
I'm psyched too. So what I was saying to you before we entered the studio, I said, I think it's so important. There are all these divorce experts and all these co-parenting experts, and they're talking about what's best for the kids, but they didn't go through it themselves. And when people ask me about my divorce, so let's rewind. Bella and I both grew up in divorce homes. We were both 3 years old when our parents divorced. Now I'm raising kids, and all I can think about my toolkit is, what do I remember as a kid being in two divorced homes? And I remember everything more so than any of the experts are giving us credit for knowing as a kid. So I want to hear your take. Like, when you started this, was it therapeutic for you? Like, tell me about Bella going through what you went through with your parents' divorce. Just give us a little insight into the world of how this all started for you.
For sure. So A Kid with Two Homes, to start with, is what I needed when I was growing up. Because as a kid with two homes, growing up since the age of 3, I just felt like there was nothing out there for the kid from the kid's perspective. It was so brilliant to see mom and dad, reading books on how to be a single mom, how to be a single dad, raising kids on your own, and power to the parents. But there was nothing out there for me. I had the school counselor, but she didn't get it. It wasn't, I understand these super nuanced situations that you're in. It's such a unique, taboo but not taboo topic to chat about divorce from the kid's perspective. And so I came back from overseas exchange when I was back in 2020 when COVID hit. And I was just like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm still going through my parents' divorce now as a young adult, and there's still nothing out there from the kid's perspective. So I did a proper search. I was like, is there anything out there? And genuinely, there was very, very, very little acknowledging the kid's perspective in divorce. So that's how A Kid with Two Homes was conceived. But my experience as a kid with two homes is a wild one, to be honest. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old. And from the age of about 3 to 18, my parents' co-parenting relationship was quite mid to high conflict. And that was really difficult as a kid with two homes. I didn't really have time to process it because it was such a ongoing situation and always constant, that I was just trying to survive, I think, as a kid of divorce, going between two homes, being that messenger. But then I hit the age of 18. It was actually just before I turned 18. It was my school graduation, and I lost it. I absolutely lost it. I was in the middle and I couldn't do it anymore. And it was one of those situations, one of those super unique situations where, mom wants to be at graduation, dad wants to be at graduation, dad wants to bring his partner. So I only get 2 tickets, but I need to get 6 because my family wants to bring everybody. And, I'm a kid with two homes, so I need those tickets. And it was just one of those tipping edge moments. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So I genuinely sat my parents down and I said, individually, because I couldn't be in the same room. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep being the messenger. This is impacting my life. It always has. This has to stop. And I'd communicated this in the past, but not to this extent. And slowly but surely, my parents listened. I think it was quite a abrupt moment where it all came out. I was very good at holding it all in. And slowly but surely, my parents turned things around. Mainly, it was really difficult for my mom. That conflict sometimes started with her, but it also ended with her in my perspective now with hindsight. And so from there, things snowballed. I had an 18th birthday that following year with both my parents there. Insane to a kid who grew up with not being able to have, I always had 2 of everything, 2 birthday parties, 2 everything. And then my 21st, both my parents were there. And then just last year, something that I never thought would happen. One, I'd get married. And two, I would get one wedding and wouldn't have to have two weddings. Both my parents were there. And to the point now where I can say that my parents' co-parenting relationship is one that is amicable. And so I've had that experience of being in the middle, being in that high conflict situation, but now being in an amicable co-parenting situation as a kid. Although an adult, I'll always be a kid of divorce and I'll always be a kid with two homes. That never stops. And that co-parenting relationship also never stops, no matter how old your kids are. So I've had that experience of both sides of how things can be. And I think that this story is it just keeps growing and it never stops. And so many things have been to happen since. But that's where I am now. And I think it's so important for the kids' perspective to be acknowledged. And my story is just one. I just want to give a voice to so many kids, including yourself, Nicki, to just say, you know what? This is how it looks from our perspective.
Yes.
And it doesn't, sometimes it's not what parents want to hear, but it's such an important thing to say.
Right. My mind is going in a million directions because part of me, like, this is therapeutic to hear because I'm 47 years old. And when you said your 18th birthday, I got this like visceral reaction of, I remember that. I remember the sports games and the game ending where maybe I got, I had 3 goals in my field hockey game and just going to the sideline and being like, who do I hug first? So I'm trying to make sure that my kids never have to have that, to the point where I say, you can go up to dad first. Like, I do it for them. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, am I overcompensating for my own little self? But it's a beautiful thing to recognize. So I'm always doing it. And then the second thing was my friends would laugh because my mom and dad could not be in the same room. But all of a sudden, I graduated college and my dad came to my stepdad's house where we had my graduation like party. And my friends and I were all like, what is happening? Oh my God. But it took me until 47 years old to talk through the resentment that I built up my whole life of things that were unsaid and things that I buried. So I give you so much credit for being 18 years old and having that conversation.
Thanks, Nicki. Yeah, it was hard though. And I still have that conversation. I think that's one thing that I want to make so clear is that it's such an ongoing process. Divorce is such an ongoing process. And these conversations that you have with your kids or the actions that you do with your co-parent or hey, it's okay, you can go say hi to dad. They don't just make a difference in that moment. They then set a precedent. And then you keep acting like that. It's not just a one and done conversation that you have to have. I still chat to my parents about their divorce and how it impacts me. I now have my own home. First time I've ever had one home. And I don't have 2 separate nights to see both parents each week. So can you be in the same house, at the same night so that I can see? It's just this ongoing thing, even as an adult, but specifically throughout childhood. Like I was an athlete. That sport scenario is already high pressure for a kid. To impact it again with high conflict, it's really difficult.
Yeah. And then you add in, is there a girlfriend? Is there a boyfriend? Is there like all these things that kids, we just feel so much. Like those are our parents when we're little are our entire world. So we want to feel like they're invincible and they're these perfect beings. And then when we see that they're not, it's really hard.
It's so hard. And you look up to them and you adore them. And then when you see them do the wrong thing, you want to ignore it, but you can't. And then you want to make it better. And then you take that responsibility on yourself. And then you feel guilt if they feel sad. Yeah. And so it's this insane conflict of how am I supposed to thrive in my own life and worry about school and all these random little kid things when I have these really big adult things that I've been exposed to. And I just want to take on myself because I love my parents so much. Right. And that's why I'm such an advocate and unapologetically an advocate for the kid of divorce, because it is not their responsibility to do that. Yeah. And that's definitely something I felt growing up. And that doesn't mean my parents are bad people or that parents, who are just trying their best sometimes will make their kids feel like that. But it's just so important to acknowledge it so that you can say that one line of, hey, you know what? Go enjoy your time with dad because You deserve that. Not because
Yeah.
your co-parent's your best mate. No, no one's asking you to do that. It's just for your kid so that they can have a relationship with them and not feel guilty about it.
So, is there a way that you can kind of point out some of the, because I love to, when I listen to a podcast, I'm always like, I love this topic, but what are some of like the tangibles for me? And I know, Bella, where I screw up sometimes as a co-parent, right? The other day, I'll give you a vulnerable example. My
Like,
kids were
this,
coming back with me from their dads
I,
and they were giving me a hard time about something, right? So I tend to have resentment build up for all of the things that I do, all of the sacrifices I make. And it's hard to not say, well, dad doesn't do half of this. I don't say it, but my kids were giving me a hard time. And I said, well, you can just stay at dad's then. And my ex husband looked at me, he goes, don't make that like a punishment. And I was like, you're absolutely right.
yeah.
I now see where the last thing I want to be is like defensive
Mm.
because I made a mistake by saying, then stay at your dad's if you're going to give me an attitude. And I'm like, oh God, I don't have the toolkit for this all the time, right? So, are there some things, if there are parents listening to this that are going through a divorce and they are worried about screwing their kids up, can you give us some do's and don'ts and they can be in random order? Like, what are some things you absolutely hear about or like talking about that are like focus areas? Do you get what I'm asking?
100% get what you're asking. I'm going to give examples because I think this is what actually hits home and this is what people don't understand. And so, okay, I'll give you an example of I'm so massive on talking badly about your co-parent and how it impacts your kid. So this is the example I'm going to use. One day, your kids have just come home. Dad was late to drop off. That pisses you off. Kids were clearly anxious about drop off because that's a high conflict situation. Kids obviously didn't want to be late. Dad didn't even want to be late. There was just traffic. But you've got the shits. Okay. Kids get in the car. You're trying to brush it off, whatever. You still got the shits with your co-parent. You're just trying to focus on your kids. And you go, you know what? Your dad always does that. He says he's going to be on time and he doesn't. He's a liar. He used to do this and it just really bothers me. And, you start talking negatively about your co-parent. You say, and he's this and he's that. And sometimes co-parents like to throw in the word narcissist. And that's a really big word for a kid. And you're hearing all these big words as a kid and you're like, I just want to make this better. I don't want to hear this. And then okay, so you've heard all these negative words about dad. Whatever, mom moves on, you end up having a nice night. The next day you wake up, you haven't packed away the washing, you haven't helped with your housework at all, and you're being lazy because it's Sunday and you're a teenager. And mom turns around and goes, you're exactly like your father.
Oh,
What does kids start to think? I'm a liar. I'm a
oh.
narcissist. I'm going to be late when I'm going to be an adult. I'm going to be all these bad things that mom just said yesterday about what dad is. So does that mean because I'm like him, she doesn't like me either?
Oh,
And that is what speaking negatively about your co-parent can do to your kids. Not only does it make them anxious that there's going to be more conflict, not only does it make you feel as though, my parents really don't like each other and they're not going to get along and they're always going to speak badly about each other and let it out on me. But actually they think I'm like one another and they don't like one another.
right.
So do they like me?
And
And
that's half of you. That's half of them.
that's it. That's 50%
Oh,
of them. And they love
yeah.
that person as well. Of
Right.
course, parents have fault. Everybody has fault. Your ex as an ex has fault too. You're going to not like those things. But separately, they are your co-parent. And one thing I always say is showing respect for your co-parent is showing respect for your kid. Because like you said, that's 50% of them.
And I love that because I want to emphasize I don't want to hear and I'm going to be tough on some people, right? I don't want to hear but he treats me this way because listen, all that is this for this. So no matter how I've felt or how I've been treated, I always try to make it work for the kids. The kids are literally in the forefront of my life. Put the ego aside. And it's because I remember the feeling. I think that's what makes me so aware is that feeling of being the kid where mom's saying this, that, and then about dad, and it backfires on mom. by talking badly about dad. She thinks
Exactly.
I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Dad is this. No, it's the opposite. I get protective of dad and I get mad at you for saying things about my dad.
And that's the thing. It's not fair, and it's not fair that sometimes maybe you are treated poorly as an ex-wife or as an ex-husband, but that's not for your kids to hear, and that's not for your kids to figure out, because they're not figuring that out. They're not seeing that you're hurt and you've got these real adult issues that you need to sort out through professional help or through your support network. And
Yeah.
instead you're relying on your kids. That's not their responsibility. And it's really hard to grasp that because they're the closest thing to you, and you're putting everything into them, and they're your entire world. But it's not their responsibility to take that on and to recognize that, because often they're just kids and they're not going to recognize that. And you're exactly right. It will backfire. And then the kids will start thinking, well, mom just hates dad, and I know she does everything for us, but now I'm harboring resentment for her, even though she was treated poorly. And that is such a conflict in a kid's head. Even
Mm,
growing up, I started to become an adult and started to realize, wait, that wasn't fair on mom, but I actually was angry at her because of the
yeah.
way that she spoke. And that's again not fair. But this is why it comes to my next point. Keep the adult talk between the adults. The kids do not need to hear it. And the difficulty with a lot of kids with two homes and a lot of kids that I've spoken with is that feeling of being in the middle and being the messenger. I personally got a phone when I was in year 3. So I think I was 8 years old. And that was because so dad could communicate with us when we're at mom's, instead of having to go through mom to get the phone to us on a Monday, which was a scheduled call when we were at mom's.
Yeah.
And it was always this, oh, is she going to answer? Is she not going to answer? Is it scheduled? Are we busy? So I just ended up getting a phone at 8 years old. And I thought initially, I was like, oh, cool. None of my friends have a phone. I have a phone. But then I was like, I wish I didn't have this phone. Why do I have this phone? Now I have the responsibility of making sure that I'm on my phone, that it's charged, that, I'm answering it when mom's happy for me to answer it, but also answering it when dad calls because I really want to speak to him. But I don't want to upset mom, but I also don't want to upset
Oh,
dad.
God.
And that then became instead of me having to have a conversation with my co-parent that might end up in conflict, I'm just going to tell Phil to tell the other parent. So, that conversation of adult stuff of, oh, this is due, or make sure that you pack this for this day because we have this event.
Mhm,
All things that
mhm.
have built my resilience, and that I have become a very responsible person and very organized person. And that's great. I can see the positives now. But as a kid, under 10, that's
Yeah.
not adult. That's the adult talk that a kid shouldn't be
That
hearing.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love that example of the phone because during my co-parenting, so things were so brutal for me and my ex when we were in the court process, right? Because the family court system, I don't know how familiar you are here in the US. It's not great. Okay? It's like this formulaic thing, and it makes you feel like non-human because you're treating your kids like a formula. But to your point on the phone, my ex got iPads for the kids. And I felt like that was me
He
in a situation where these objects were weaponizing my relationship with the kids because dad got the iPads, and the kids started doing their calls on those. And when the kids don't want to see your face first thing in the morning because you're so eager to talk to them, and oh my gosh, it's my morning to say hi, you're at dad's. It's like, imagine feeling that feeling when you're like 6 and 7 years old of like, I have to please mom and say hi with her face in my face first thing in the morning. It's like us parents need to realize we're forcing so much on these small humans out of our own like pride and ego at times.
And that's it. But I think one thing I want to offer from the kids' perspective, and Nikki, I think you'll get this, is they want to please that, and they see that. And so not only is this mom's calling, I really want to speak to her because I really miss her, but I want to match her energy. But that's not how I'm feeling because I actually just really miss her. And it's hard for parents. I can empathize, and I'm imagining because I'm not a parent myself, but to be like, I just really want to talk to my kid. I don't want to put this responsibility or pressure on them. And that then leads me to my next point is about communication, but age-appropriate communication.
Yeah.
And that's a massive one is, yes, keep the adult talk between the adults and make sure that you're communicating with your kid, but in an age-appropriate manner. You know, if it means having a conversation with your co-parent before you call your kids in the morning, hey, do you reckon the kids are up for a FaceTime? Really miss them. If you think it's a good idea, keen to have a chat to them. That might not be your co-parenting relationship. That's also okay. But if you can check in, if you can have that type of co-parenting relationship where you guys can put the kids at the center of your doors and not in the middle, as one of my very lovely divorce coaches here in Australia says, it's super important to be able to be like, I don't want to put this pressure and I want to acknowledge that they might not be up to this, but I miss them and I want to have a chat to them. And that's also okay because your kids are going to match that and they're going to want to please you and they're going to want to not feel guilty or they don't want to feel responsible for taking away a sense of happiness that they know they are your world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think too, the communication and everything that I say now as an adult is I wish that my parents talked to me about this. They just imagined that when I was little that I would just be equipped. But to what you said, I was always trying to make everyone happy. So when I was rewarded constantly with the Nicki's such a good kid. She's so easygoing. She's up for whatever. She's always got her bags packed. She loves being on the go. Everyone put that on me. So I started believing it. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm such a homebody. I want to be home most days with my kids, just like nesting. So it is funny to think I just wanted everybody to get along. And if I was the common denominator in helping that, I was doing it at a very young age. So is that what you experienced too? Is
And this is what I mean. Like, and I didn't make it very clear, but yes, the blog Kid with Two Homes therapeutic is an understatement. I'm still going through it, and especially like now as an adult with your kids, I can't imagine. I hope that for myself as well. But now having my own home and not having to pack a bag every week, I'm not joking. Every week it's therapeutic to not have to pack that bag. But to your point on feeling that responsibility, but wearing that Bella's such a good kid. Wow, she's so organized. I wore it as a badge of honor. And I still do. I still can't move past that perfect complexion of, oh wow, I want to be the perfect kid. But I was for maybe not the right reason. I was
right.
because I was such a people pleaser and because I just wanted to make mom and dad happy because I knew that they weren't. And I wanted to make a really horrible situation better, which was impossible for my physician. But I know that logically, and I've studied it now having education in that. Like, I understand it logically, but emotionally, I still struggle so much to be like, hey, that's not my responsibility. That's out of my control. That's not in my capacity. It's insanely hard, but you can't expect kids to know this, and they are guided by you. They are guided by parents who show them what the landscape is. And
Yeah.
kids, no matter what, if they love and adore you, they're going to want to make you happy and they're going to want to say the things that you want to hear. But that's when it's so important for the adults to be the adults and stand up and put the
Yeah.
kids at the forefront.
Yeah. And be the leader. Show them that you're the leader. And even when you have tough moments, like to reassure them that that was a tough moment mom had. I shouldn't have said that. Like, imagine that one of your parents actually apologizing to you and taking accountability. That's just, to me, that didn't happen in my life. I saw everybody, if they made a mistake, it was like brushed under the carpet, never talked about again, never acknowledged, never owned. And now I'm trying to be an adult who's like, I know my kid understood that. I know my kid felt something with that. So I'm going to sit down and talk to them about it. And again, I'm not trying to sound like I'm this perfect parent, but there is a lot that I have based on having been through it myself. And Bella, every journal from when I was growing up, because of my parents' divorce, I overemphasized, I don't know if you do this, I overemphasized love. Like a Disney movie. Everything in my life was supposed to be, I'm going to marry this prince and everything's going to be perfect and we're going to have kids. And so I overdid that and now I'm divorced. So I'm working through it still.
And that's the thing, it never stops. And it's really interesting you had that experience, Nikki, because I think I actually had the opposite. I vowed to never get married. If this is what could happen, this is my thought process. If this is what could happen, no way am I putting myself in that situation. No way am I even allowing the possibility to put to for this to happen. And then I remember vividly, I found a note that my dad had written my mom when they were married. And I actually haven't spoken to my parents about this, and this would be interesting if they listen to this, but I read it and I was amazed
Pause for a second.
by the fact that my dad spoke to my mom in this way. I never really saw this because I was 3 and I was so young at the time that they separated. And I was just like, so it was this, which we never spoke about. That was never, a thing. And now it's this. Now, but then add to my wild story, I met my husband when I was 11 years old. I met him on a beach and I instantly, it's insane. I met him when we were 11 and we were really great friends. And then when we were 14, we started dating. And still I had this concept in my head of, no, this doesn't work. But he's just, a good friend and I really like him and I'm just a little kid and it's fine. And then we're 18 and we're still together. And I'm like, this isn't how it works. And then we're 21 and we're still together and he's really great. And no, I said I wouldn't get married and this isn't how it's supposed to work out. And now I'm 25 and I'm married and I'm so happy and things have worked out. And I've had to work so bloody hard to get this concept of love through my head and that it can work.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. I work through it every day. And he's been in there right with me. And he is not from divorced parents. And he has had a beautiful life that I'm so happy for him. But he's been there every step of the way. He was there through the high conflict. And then we grew up together and he was there that time that you were talking about when your parents were in the same room. My mom had my dad and his wife over to her house. And my brother and I literally ran upstairs because we were just like, what is happening? This is crazy. Why is everyone sitting at the same table and they're okay? And I left my boyfriend, my 18-year-old boyfriend at the time, at the table with my mom, her partner, my dad and his wife. And so he's been there. And in this concept of love and marriage and everything like that, it's insane how different kids of divorce experience it. Like me and you, for example. And this is why I say everybody's perspective is so unique and it needs to be understood. But we've both struggled with the concept of love in different ways. You had this ideal. I had this ideal. And now and then we go through life and life happens. And it's like, how do we work through that? And I think one thing that I'm grateful for is I know that anything can happen. And I'm prepared for that in a way. But I work at it every day to make sure that I'm, doing what I can to make sure that my parents' divorce isn't impacting my life now. And that's hard, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Oh, you have to do it. We were at my daughter's gymnastics meet yesterday and my mom and I started cracking up because my mom and my ex-husband, I don't have to say much more. I try to listen, if I told the whole story, have written a book. I would be on Netflix, right? There would be a lot, but to your point, what are we doing? I'm protecting the kids' privacy. Even when I am online, people know this much of my story because I care about keeping it intact for my kids. But we have to laugh. We were sitting, my ex-husband, my mom, my dad, all sitting together at my daughter's gymnastics meet yesterday. And my mom and I were like, what is this? This is like a Seinfeld episode. This is not normal. And all we could do was laugh because to think about everything we've been through and to still be sitting there having nothing figured out, but a few steps ahead from where we used to be was everything in that moment.
And that's it. You need to take the small win. I think we might have cut out there for a second. But
we did, and it happened a few times, but I know in Riverside it typically reconnects it. It's weird.
Yeah. But no, that's the thing. You got to take the small wins. And I think that if a small win is going to pick up drop off and not yelling at each other, that's a small win for your kid. You want to create these neural links in your kid that it's not going to be every time mom and dad is in a room, some Hiroshima is going to happen.
Right.
It's this feeling of, mom and dad might have some conflicts sometimes and we're not perfect, but not every time that you go to mom or that you go to dad, this is going to happen. And it's so important for parents to work hard at that so that their kids
Yeah.
don't start expecting or having anxiety going into an event. Especially
Absolutely.
sporting events. Like, the fact that you guys were all sitting together for your kid, that's incredible, that they can look and not have to look in two different directions when they finish their thing and be like, "I don't know how it's happening, but they're sitting there and they're surviving and it's okay." That
Yeah.
in itself is such a big win.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy for your kid because I know how that would feel, to have that. But,
Yeah, and deep down, Bella, selfishly, I'm like, I hope that Layla understands that like we're all doing our best for her. Deep down, she might just be like, it's my gymnastics meet. This isn't really might not even phase her, but we're doing all the
But if it's
energetic,
not praising her, then you're doing the right thing. And that's what you need
right,
to, like, really be
right,
proud of yourself for, because when people are like, "Oh, my kid's really not that impacted by my divorce," genuinely, like, I think, I've listened to you and I've put all the things in and I'm telling them they're not responsible and they just seem unfazed, and I'm like, "Well, maybe that's because it's working, because you're communicating with them, because you're telling them they're not responsible, because they're looking and they're not thinking, 'Oh, mom and dad together, conflict.' They're thinking, 'That's my mom and dad. We're not a broken family. That
yeah,
word needs to be thrown in the bin.'" Like, it's
right.
just, they're my mom and dad. That's what my family looks like now, and they're co-parents. Yeah, so go Nikki. If
Yeah.
she's looking and she's just, "This is just my gymnastics, mate."
Yeah, I
And
just saw her. She just waved and here I am, right? I'm like this there's this iconic thing happening on the side bench and she's just unfazed. You're right. That's a good way to look at it is I will take all the angst and the grit and the like, holy crap, pat yourself on the back. You've worked through some shit.
oh,
Um,
and your kids will know, and this is a thing, like, now, having grown up with a lot of hindsight, and even at the time, I knew how hard it was. Your kids know. They're
yeah,
watching you, they're seeing you, they're watching how you love yourself, they're watching how you support yourself. And now I know, and I'm so bloody proud of my parents for getting through some of those moments.
oh,
Um, and yeah, your kids are watching you, they hear
yeah,
you, they see you, and as much as it's not their responsibility, they love and care for you, and they will always appreciate everything that you do when you put them
yeah.
first.
I'm trying I'm at the point where I'm trying to give forgiveness at this age, forgiveness to my parents for doing the best they could with what they were given, right? Because you could easily say, "How did you not do this for me?" or "How did you not see what I was feeling?" But I'm in the era of letting go of that and letting them see that I am doing this different and communicating with my own parents at this point. Here's what I'm doing. It's not ideal. My ex is at the house mowing the lawn. Not ideal. Or we're spending Easter together at his sister's house. Not ideal, but for the kids, isn't that ideal if you can do that?
And that's the thing. You need to know what's right for your kids and your
Yeah,
situation alone. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't matter what people think. If this works for you and your kids and
right.
you're all safe and you're all saying this is what works for us, it's actually no one else's business. And
It's none. There's a lot of
everybody,
noise around it.
there is, and everybody has an opinion, and that's okay, but it's so important to protect your children and your little family no matter what. Even though you're divorced, you will always be a family, you'll always be a unit, and you need to work together with your co-parent to make that happen, whatever that looks like. So, yes, keep having those conversations, Nikki. I still chat with my parents about resentment and forgiveness and all that, and it's so
Yeah.
important.
Yes. Every other weekend doesn't have to be this equation of 50-50. When your kids have sports, when you could step in and be part of their lives on dad's weekend or vice versa, like why wouldn't you take every moment that you can get of that extra time instead of thinking, I'm going to miss half of my kid's life? Because that was my first thing when we were getting divorced. I was like, like the craziness of it all made me feel like, am I going to miss half of their weekends?
Yeah.
But we've learned that you still can show up to their weekends no matter what.
And that's where amicable co-parenting comes in, because my dad literally would come to the school gate after, like, for us to walk out of school, give him a quick hug, and then get on the bus to go to mom. Like, I'm talking
Nice.
come to training sessions just to see us on a Tuesday because he wouldn't see us till a Thursday. And that effort and that, okay, even though mom and dad at times had to be on opposite sides of the soccer field,
Yes.
literally, it
Yes.
just meant that they could be in the same spot so that we could have both parents at that soccer game to not have to recount everything in our lives twice or relive everything twice. I had the 2 birthday parties. I had the 2 of everything. And let me tell you, being able to have one thing and not having to recount or feel guilty or miss out details or try to compare, like, changes so much for a
Yeah.
kid.
I
Yeah, it's
had my ex running the popcorn. I put him to work at my kid's birthday party, right? Like I put all the plans together and he showed up and I was like, "You're on the snow cone maker and the popcorn machine." And he was like, I just looked around. I was like, some people can judge, but think about
the
how great that is for the kids right now. So I'm with you. I'm trying. I made it sound easier than it is. Um, but one more thing that I want to touch on because I see it and I don't talk about it on my short form platforms, but parents who are going online and airing their dirty laundry online about their ex who they have children with, like, can we just please tell people to like go to a therapist? Online venting about your ex cheating or your ex narcissistic who didn't pay the child support. Can you even imagine in 10 years what we're going to be looking at if these kids are seeing their parents vent their private stuff online? Do you talk about that at all?
This is it, and I see it, and it literally makes me put my phone down because it's just what I went through, but exacerbated on a online platform to the world, and it stays there forever. This 2 points. 1, remember, showing respect for your co-parent is showing respect for your kid. Doesn't mean they have to be your best mate. Doesn't mean they didn't pay the child support. Doesn't mean that they didn't cheat or aren't XYZ. It just means that you're showing respect for your kid by not putting something out there. 2, kids nowadays are on social media.
Yeah.
This is a footprint that you can't get rid of, and kids are able to see this. You can't hide this. You might be on private. Your kid's mom will see it and tell their kid, and then Johnny
The
will tell it
teachers,
at school, and the
teachers,
teachers will tell,
coaches. Yeah.
and everybody will know. And then it's who knows what can happen in this day and age. Like a TikTok will be made or something, and this kid will stumble across, oh, that's my mom's post.
Yes.
Oh, did that
Yes.
happen? This is my life, and I didn't know that happened, and now it's online? Now
Yeah.
everybody else knows, and we haven't communicated this in our own home? How am I supposed to deal with this? And then
Yeah.
they just pull back, and
Yes.
or they start acting out. Or we see these behaviors that are really difficult to, why is my kid acting like this? Well, maybe they saw something that you posted online that you didn't think your kid would see. That
Yeah.
was really not appropriate for that forum.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you, and again, unapologetically advocate for the kid. It's not age appropriate. It's not appropriate. Get your support circle, talk to your mates, have those people where you can let out. You're absolutely entitled to do so. Do it with a professional, do it in the right setting, and do it in an age appropriate
Yeah.
manner.
Yes, I love that. All right. If we want more of you, where can we find you?
You can find me at www.akidwithtwohomes.com. That's the blog and a heap of resources. I collaborate with a heap of professionals on there. But you can also find me on Instagram at akidwithtwohomes, TWO. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Nicki. It's such an important conversation, and I really hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for being here and back to Sydney, Australia to finish your day. I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you for the conversation, and I'll be in touch soon. We'll keep in touch on DMs.
For sure. Thanks, Nicki. See ya.
Have a good one.